Welcome to Character in Action with Matthew J. Norcross, the official podcast of the 7 Degrees of Change Foundation. Come journey with us on the real-life stories of character in action. And now here's your host, Matthew J. Norcross.
Welcome to Character in Action from the 7 Degrees of Change Foundation. I'm Matthew J. Norcross here in the studio with my producer, Bobby Dillmore.
Great to be here, Matt, as always.
Yes, same here. Now, this week, we're talking with David Capen, a political strategist and public affairs consultant with over a decade of experience at the federal, state, and local level. He serves as president of Capen Consulting, LLC, where he has amassed a winning record in political consulting, strategic communications and marketing, fundraising, and public relations. David has consulted on over 32 political campaigns with an all-time victory rate of 92%, having helped elect several dozen prominent officials at every level of government. He now lives on a small horse farm with his wife, Rachel, and their many pets. Outside of his work, David enjoys playing golf, shooting clays, and traveling to appreciate God's creation. He joins us now over the phone. David, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Matthew. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity.
We're excited to have this opportunity. Now, you're here because you're a living example of character in action. Now, before we get started, can you please tell our listeners more about yourself?
Yeah, certainly. Again, just want to thank you guys for having me on the program. I've really enjoyed following your show and been fascinated to hear some of the personal stories about these very big name figures in North Carolina and across the country, and it's very inspiring. So honored to be in the same chair. So starting out about myself, a few fun facts to kind of set the stage for my story. I was born into a military family. Both my parents served as officers in the United States Navy. They actually met in Annapolis, Maryland while attending the Naval Academy, and they got married upon graduation, had 3 kids, of which I'm the youngest. So growing up in a Navy family was a bit of a unique experience, moving around every 2 years to a new location. It definitely had its challenges. Up to this point in time, both being a Navy kid and then just throughout my own life, I've actually lived in 8 different states, which is also kind of unique. It gives me a little bit of a different perspective. So people ask me all the time, where is home for you? And honestly, the best answer is simply to say America. There's really no part of this country that I've ever felt like a stranger. I feel like I'm always able to make do and find home wherever I'm at and find people to connect with. And I really attribute that to my upbringing. So growing up, it was really challenging moving around to a new place and making new friends about every 2 years. But looking back, I'm really able to appreciate the qualities that experience has provided me as an adult. But really, though, North Carolina has become home to me in a way that I'd never really experienced before. I've served in various capacities in state government in North Carolina, and my wife is from here in the Greensboro area. So I think at this point, I'm officially allowed to claim status as a North Carolinian. But I moved down to North Carolina when I was 18 years old so that I could attend Campbell University, which is in Bowies Creek, Harnett County. And the reason there being Campbell was one of 18 schools in the country that had a PGA golf management program. And at the time, that's all I could think to do. I played golf pretty much my entire life since I was 4 or 5 years old, so literally as long as I can remember. And at 18 years old or 17, when I was looking at going to school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And it sounded pretty fun to be able to go to school and major in golf. So that's what I started out doing. But by the time my junior year came around, I just knew that the golf industry was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Still love to play golf, but I realized that I didn't want to work in the industry, but actually kind of took time away from being able to play golf. So I was working a golf internship in Ohio at the time, and just found myself feeling kind of really empty with life and just feeling like in a pit. Not just professionally, but personally as well, just kind of with the condition of my life. I felt like I was in a really dark place, and I just knew there had to be a better way. And this was kind of the first time in my life that I really sought to know who Jesus was. And, I had believed as a kid, but never really lived for him up to that point. And I think that was really realizes the difference between believing and living for him and what that means. So something inside of me at that time just knew that Jesus was the only answer to all the problems that I was facing in life. So really for the first time, I began to seek him and pursue him. And wouldn't you believe it, Matthew, but as soon as I turned my heart towards him, he came running to me, and that's when I really got to experience the Father's heart of God and recognizing that, I'm his child. He has a genuine care for me. He's got a plan for my life, and that his heart is so infinitely big that he's got a personal care for every single one of us, for you, for me, for the sinner and the saint. And, he wants that relationship with us, and nothing else in this world would ever satisfy our hearts except for that. And so at this time in my life, I'm really beginning to see God's hand at work, transforming every area in my life inside and out. But, from a worldly perspective, like I'm still just working at this golf course and kind of feeling directionless with that purpose. Like I know I have a purpose, but I'm not really sure what it is. So I prayed a simple yet fervent prayer, asking God what he wants me to do, which was kind of a novel concept for me at the time, asking what his direction was and not my own. But God answered like I never would have imagined possible. And his word was really just implanted in my heart that his calling for me was public service. So I said, okay. So his word was implanted into my heart that his calling for me was public service. So I said, okay, God, that sounds great and all, but what does that mean? What does that look like in my life? I don't, at the time, like I didn't know anything about public service or politics, and certainly wasn't qualified, not from a worldly standpoint. But I really learned in this whole experience, which I'll get to, but I learned that God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the call. And so, the Bible says that the heart of man plans his way, but his steps are established by the Lord. So I, taking that verse, I said, okay, God, what is that step? What is the step that's going to put me on that way, and take me to where he seemingly wants me to achieve this insurmountable goal? And as clear as day, his answer was to go to Washington, D.C. and walk the halls of Congress, and that he had something for me there. So I went and I walked the halls of Congress, and I had a stack of my resumes, at which point, for context, my resume at the time was golf course, majoring in golf. So it was about as unqualified as one could be from a worldly perspective when trying to pursue a congressional internship. But I made a list of every congressional district that I had ever lived in, which, having lived in 8 states, that was obviously a lot of different congressional districts. So I knocked on probably 24 doors, seeking an internship opportunity. And I'll tell you, I had more doors shut in my face than you would imagine. People saying, thanks, but we're not taking interns this time of year. Thanks for stopping by. We'll put this in the filing cabinet and take a look. Never, any form of rejection imaginable, you name it. That's kind of what I experienced, and that's what I got. So I went back to my friend Bill's house where I was staying during this visit to DC, and I spent a little time just by myself, and really, was letting the enemy get in my head that evening, just discouraging me and making me feel like for having spent my day even trying. Like, who did I think I am? Why did I think that I would be qualified for this? Or, did God really call me to this? All these kind of doubtful thoughts. But then the Holy Spirit just came over me with a directive to open my Bible as a random page, and I read the verse from Matthew 17, verses 20 through 21, where Jesus says, truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. And so the key takeaway from that was if you have faith. And you see, a lot of people, myself included, look for signs from God and looking to hear from God. And it, really kind of came to the realization, or had the revelation, that there's nearly 800,000 words in the Bible. So he's already spoken to us and continues to do so through his living word. So I said, okay, I've got to have the faith. And if I have the faith, then I'm going to see him move. And it was just a change in the position of my heart. And so, right then it just silenced the voice of the enemy, and had this faith in my heart, knowing, God called me to do this, and he would make a way where there seemingly wasn't a way for me. I just, all of a sudden, it just a shift in my heart. And I kid you not, in a matter of mere moments after the position of my heart changed to a position of faith towards God, I received an email on my phone from the U.S. House Ways and Means Committee asking me to come in the next day and interview for an internship in their office. Now, for context here, the Ways and Means Committee, for your listeners who are not familiar, it's a big deal on Capitol Hill. They're a key committee. All members of Congress in the House want to be assigned to Ways and Means. It's one of those top committees. I mean, at this time, this was during the 115th Congress. They were working on the historic tax reform package, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So I share all that to say, I hadn't even given my resume to their office. I had not even considered applying. It was not on my radar or in the realm of possibilities. It honestly would have been laughable for me to go in and apply for an internship there. So somehow they got my resume, and looking back, it's only through God that that could happen, and that He set this up, that this was His plan from the very start, before I even knew it, and He was just waiting for my heart to be in a position of faith for Him to be able to execute and show His hand at work. So I go into this interview the next day with the full faith and confidence, knowing that I'm on assignment from the Lord. This is what God has for me, but yet the humility, knowing that I'm completely unqualified, but through Him. So long story short, I got the job. I was invited back for 2 subsequent internships with the committee, which really kickstarted my career in public service. And just going back a little bit too, for context of how little I knew about politics at the time, evening after work, I was walking around the Capitol building and had a run-in with Mitch McConnell, but I had no idea who Mitch McConnell was. And probably made me appear pretty confident in how I carried myself, but it was really just ignorance. I had no idea who this man was or his significance. But fast forward, had a great experience working with the Ways and Means Committee, and then transitioned that, lost the Republican majority in the House, and went to work at the state level at the North Carolina General Assembly, and had a great experience there, and it's led me to where I am today.
Quite an amazing story. Now, how do you define character?
Yeah, great question. I really look at character as what's on the inside. A lot of people will define character as what you do when nobody's watching. I think a few of your previous guests have said that as well, and I definitely think that that's an element. But actions come about after words, and words come about after thoughts. And so I really think that thoughts are kind of the wellspring of what's inside of us all, and we all have an individual responsibility to set our minds on the right track and to guard our minds, to guard our thoughts. And I think that character, in that sense, can be an innate trait. I think that God has given us each unique giftings, abilities, and ways of thinking. But I firmly believe it's incumbent on all of us to develop our character on an ongoing basis through consistent demonstration of actions. It's, they say in sports, practice makes perfect. Practice, practice, practice. And nobody is perfect except for Christ Himself. I myself am especially far from perfect, but I really think that it's the pursuit of wanting to do better and to be better that defines character in my book. And I think it's something that is a continuous process of development, that anybody can be great, but also anybody can fall from grace. And so it's really about getting back up, trying again, not letting yourself be defeated by the world around you, but just getting back up and seeking to improve it.
Yeah, and it's a great definition too. So please tell us a story of witnessing either in person or in history. Someone that was a true phoenix, someone that was a role model, leading by example and making the world a better place.
Well, thanks for that question, Matthew. And I don't say this as a cop-out, but I really can think of no better example of a phoenix than the Lord Jesus Christ Himself. Sometimes it's easy for us to worship Him as God, when recognize Him as Lord, read about the things He did in the Bible, talk about Him, and just what a great Lord He is, what a great man He was walking this earth. And for those of us with eyes to see the things He continues to do now, every day, in our lives and in the lives of others. But it can be hard to really understand the magnitude of His character until we really try to put it in action ourselves, I think. Things that, in general, things always appear easy until we try to do them ourselves. And then we realize what it's actually like, what it actually takes to walk in somebody else's shoes. And so, when we become Christians and we commit ourselves to going and trying to walk like Jesus walks and to love like Jesus loves, that's a hard assignment. And I'm certainly far from where I'd like to be in that walk, but I can only hope that I'm getting better each day and trying to pursue that. And, I think that we all as Christians are seeking to become more Christ-like in our actions and be able to identify the ways that we can grow there. So when you think about it, Jesus has done some absolutely radical things to show the love of God in this world. Yeah. And He's paired that with the boldness of truth, the love and truth. And it's a careful balance that really only Jesus can model perfectly, because if you have too much of one without the other, that's not a good mix. So it's that balance of love and truth that Christ carried out. But really, I think most of us have a hard time, praying publicly in groups, let alone boldly petitioning the Lord to heal someone who's sick or injured or, let alone raise dead things to life, right? Like the Lord set the standard, and we're all called to live it. And in John 14, verses 12 through 14, Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater than these, because I am going to the Father, and I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it." And so that kind of going back to my personal testimony, it's one of those life verses of just having the faith that, we can do all things through Christ. It's just actually exercising that faith could be a whole other thing. And that's really where I think that Jesus shines as the example of what a phoenix ought to be.
The beautiful thing about that idea, Matt, as I was thinking about it, is the phoenix, the idea of that is to come out of the ashes.
Yes, exactly, Robbie.
And nobody was a better example of coming back from dead, right? I mean, he completely did come out of the tomb after 3 days. And as that he modeled, right, that we actually have to die to ourselves according to we got to be phoenixes
exactly
in order to accomplish what God has for us. So, and certainly, David, you've been an example of that. Is when you gave up the golf thing, and what a neat story, by the way. Like, oh my gosh, that all of a sudden you get this invitation. So you didn't tell us on that, because talk about a phoenix. You went and you knocked on all these doors and you had nowhere to go, and then all of a sudden you prayed earnestly. Where did they get the information to call you? Do you know?
Yeah, to this day, I don't know for certain. I think I have a hypothesis that it was through Congressman George Holding's office. Was the congressman representing the district where Campbell University is, and he's one of the offices that I had swung by. And I think it might have been somebody on his staff. And I say that because they were like a couple doors down from the Ways and Means office location, which I didn't even realize at the time. But so as much as I credit whoever on his staff passed along my resume, that's certainly appreciated. I also view that as they were sort of an agent of the Lord, because nobody else could have orchestrated this in such a way for me to get that email and have my resume come across, let alone for my resume to come across their desk, but for them to reach out and have the opportunity for that interview.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it is. So please share a moment that stands out in your mind, something big or even the slightest gesture that was a transformative Phoenix moment, one where you knew you had a significant impact on an individual's life, or on a group of people.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's hard for me to think about this one, but I kind of go back to one of my earliest memories when I was very young, maybe 7 or 8 years old. I was a decent junior golfer, and I was invited to a U.S. kids golf tournament. It was down in Georgia or maybe Florida, I think. I don't recall which one, but it was somewhere down south. And they had one of these fun programs the day before the tournament. It was like a putting contest. So think mini putt, but on actual golf greens. Anyways, I did not do that well in that tournament. It's kind of mediocre. But at the end of the weekend, and they got to announce all the winners from the tournament and the various other programs they had. And when they got to the putting contest, they had announced that I won, which was shocking. And so they called me out to the stage to accept a little trophy, and everyone applauded. It was this big scene. But I realized that I couldn't have won that. And I told the host it was not possible for me to have won, because I knew for a fact that there was somebody else in my very group who was doing this contest, that somebody else in my group had done better than I did. And surely there was somebody else in another group in this tournament who had scored even better than they did, but I knew it wasn't me. So after looking at the scorecards, the officials realized that they had made a mistake and they announced the wrong winner. I had not actually won this contest. And so they redid the presentation of that award to the rightful winner, and they got to receive their due credit and applause. But then at the very end of that banquet dinner or lunch, whatever it was, they had announced that they had one more award to present. And then they called up little David Capen to accept this. They called it the Honesty Award, which I think they just made up as a feel-good thing. But it was in recognition of all that had transpired. And me, at 7 or 8 years old, going and telling the truth about this after having kind of received that public credit, to go and tell the truth and then make sure that it was presented to the rightful winner. So that was a really impactful moment for me, and kind of teaching me the importance of integrity. And really, I mean, golf in general has taught me a lot of those important life lessons, because golf is all about integrity. You know, a lot of times, especially in junior golf, and you're really keeping your own score a lot of the time, so it takes that level of honesty. But that was probably the most public, impactful moment of demonstrating one of these character qualities. And certainly one that sticks in my mind is when I really experienced the importance of such a fundamental characteristic.
So, speaking of telling the truth and integrity, I want to talk about the trait of trustworthiness. Now, this has become an incredibly lost art, especially in our government and in our institutions. And my question to you is, how do you define and live out trustworthiness? And more importantly, how do you instill it in others?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. You know, I think trustworthiness is very similar to one of your other characteristics and responsibility in my mind. And you know, to me, trustworthiness is really, you do what you say you're going to do, and you follow through on commitments. Your word is your bond, and you preserve that by not making promises you can't keep. You know, trust can take a really long time to build and develop, but it just takes a moment to crumble it down. So I think trustworthiness is consistent action that is demonstrating follow through on the commitments that you make.
Yeah, that's actually a great response. And the next trait I want to talk to you about this week is caring. And my question to you about this trait is, how do you demonstrate caring as a political consultant?
Very good question. Caring is a very lost art in a lot of areas of life, but especially in politics, I think caring can be thrown out the window. You know, politics can be very dehumanizing. I say dehumanizing in the sense of, you know, forgetting that
exactly
people are people, right? I mean, everybody's passionate on all sides of issues. And sometimes we forget that there's real human beings involved. You know, they've got families, they've got livelihoods. They love and bleed the same way that we do. And so I try to demonstrate caring by recognizing that everybody's got a story to tell. And while sometimes we may disagree, you know, on a political matter, on a policy position, there's a reason that the other person feels the way they do. And maybe if I had lived their life and had the exact same experiences as they've had, I might be inclined to think the same exact way they do. So it doesn't make them a bad person, and it doesn't make me always in the right either. I think that caring is something, caring is really coming to the table with a heart that seeks to understand the, you know, quote unquote, other side beyond just the issues, but really understand who they are as people. And so, you know, there are certainly bad actors in politics, just people who are not good, right, on both sides. And I care a great deal about removing those kind of people from a candidate who is just a good person, who has these positive qualities and characteristics, and who's genuinely there to serve the people they represent. Those are the people that I want to help get into office, and help them get elected to higher office if they're already in office. So, you know, I really feel like a responsibility to help shape the political landscape through my work, help shape it for the better, help improve institutions from the inside out. Certainly don't do it for the money, and I never have, but I do it for that purpose, for the calling that we talked about earlier. And I think the moment, if I ever lose that, then I better find myself another job.
Yeah, that's a great response. Now, the last trait I want to talk about today is citizenship. And my question to you is, what do you think it means as someone in politics to be a good citizen?
I think being a good citizen can be small things. It can be as simple as picking up a piece of trash you see on the sidewalk, or, you know, leaving your work area better than you found it. You know, it can also be a little bit more than that. It can be helping local organizations to have a positive impact in your community. You know, keeping in touch with your community. You know, serving in your church, helping out your neighbors if they need help. You know, but I think really, from a political standpoint, I think kind of the bare minimum, it most certainly can and is researching candidates, taking time to understand the issues at play, and, you know, certainly voting in elections. I think we have a duty as Americans to use the freedom that we've been blessed with to be engaged with our government, and voting is kind of the bare minimum of that. And I think Plato said one of the penalties of refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. So I would just encourage anybody listening to this, please, please, please mark your calendar for Election Day, both the primary and the general. Research the candidates on your ballot and cast your vote, because it means a great deal. And a lot of times people will say, well, my vote doesn't count. There's enough people out there that are going and casting their ballots. I don't really want to get engaged in politics, but if you don't, then who else? I've seen elections come down to, single digit vote differential, where it absolutely would have made a difference if a few neighbors got together and made sure they went and cast their ballots. So just really think that the mark of citizenship is being engaged, recognizing what's going on in your government, and casting your vote at the bare minimum.
Perfect. Now, before we close, please share with us some thoughts on how we can bring character back into our culture.
Well, I think to bring character back into our culture, we need to do two things. We need to talk about it, and we need to be about it. And talking about it itself is kind of the easier aspect of those two. But talking about it is not too common these days. And so I certainly appreciate programs like this and efforts to develop curriculum in schools that are built around character, so that we keep it as a priority in our society. I think that we talk about the things we care about, and I think that character is one of those things that ought to be top of mind in these conversations of development. So, but more than just talking about it, we need to be about it as well, and we need to walk the walk. We need to demonstrate character, not in a flashy, self-serving way, but in a manner that's authentic. And it's just amazing. I'm sure we've all experienced in different ways, but it's amazing what can happen when you offer one kind word to somebody, one gesture of goodwill, one secret blessing that you can anonymously give to someone else. Not only is it good for others, but it's good for us too. And it really just restores our soul and makes us more like Jesus every day. So I'm really not sure what more we could want to strive for in this life.
Yeah, me neither. So, David Capen, thank you for joining us, and it was an honor and a privilege to be able to speak with you today.
Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
And thank you, Robbie, for your help.
As fun, as always.
Character in Action is a co-production of the Truth Network and the 7 Degrees of Change Foundation. Your host is me, Matthew J. Norcross. Our producers are Robbie Dillmore and Richard Shannon, and our intro is done by Robbie Dillmore. If you like this show, please listen to and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes are posted every Sunday. Thank you for listening, and always remember, everyone can be a phoenix.